What's good, everybody? Just hit 20 fucking episodes. Let's get it. Let's just address the fucking elephant in the room immediately, right off rip. I was wrong about the Charlo brothers fights this past weekend. What are you gonna do? You know, I predicted they would both lose, and I was very much incorrect about that. And that's sometimes the fucking risk you take when you do predictions, man. As much as it's like a cool opportunity to look like you could read the future, it's also an equally good opportunity to be super wrong and look like a hater and an asshole. But, you know, I thought that the guys they were stepping up to fight, that they were moving up into a league, you know, a level of competition that neither of them had particularly been to yet. And I think a combination in both fights of them being better than I was giving them credit for, and at least in the Jermell fight, you know, Rosario maybe not being as durable as I thought. But before we talk about those fights in that card, because that was a huge night for boxing, there was just a couple of other cards I wanted to get to real quick. First of all, Josh Taylor got a first round knockout on Saturday against his mandatory Apinun Khongsong, who I don't really understand why he was the mandatory for this fight. I mean, Josh Taylor, as far as I know, has 2 different belts. He's the top guy at 140, outside of Jose Ramirez. And it seemed ridiculous that somebody on this level that was this young and kind of inexperienced and hadn't fought any opposition of significance for the most part, why he would be the mandatory. This is where I start getting confused about what the belts are and what the role of the belts is, because, you know, when you see mandatories and it's tough guys, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, we're forcing the very, very best to be accountable to fighting a certain level of opposition. I don't feel like this was that. It was a really weird mismatch. You know, I looked Khongsong up on BoxRec and he was ranked like 160th or something. So the idea that someone that's not in the top 100 on BoxRec would ever be the mandatory for a title seems ridiculous to me. So I think this was just alphabet soup bullshit. And hopefully we can get Taylor Ramirez as soon as possible. There's really nothing to even talk about with this fight. He landed a weird right hand to the body. The guy went down, couldn't get up. You know, I'm not hating on Khongsong. He's, you know, I'm sure he's a good young fighter. It's just like, how do these guys wind up in these fucking world-class opportunities, you know, especially in a stacked division like that, where there's an abundance of talent for Taylor to have, you know, exclusively challenging fights. Why a fight like this could ever happen is beyond me. I don't fucking get it. But aside from that, Taylor looked good. You know, he looked tall. He looked like he's going to be, he looked like the fucking future welterweight champion, if I'm being honest. He's a big, tall guy for a junior welterweight. And once he fights Ramirez, I think he's probably going to beat Ramirez. That's just my opinion. I think he's a better, longer, more explosive version of Postol, of Victor Postol. But that's obviously the fight to make at 140. Hopefully they make that as soon as possible. Also this weekend, the World Boxing Super Series for cruiserweights finally fucking ended. Mairis Breidis winning a majority decision over Yuniel Dorticos from Cuba. This wasn't like a barn burner necessarily. There's not a phone booth fight, Gotti Ward shit, but this was a really, really good fight. If you got the zone, I would recommend you go back and watch this, because there's something cool about the cruiserweight division where it's an odd combination of heavyweight power but light heavyweight athleticism. So that risk of the one punch, you know, changing the fight is still there. It's just that they're a little bit smaller and more athletic. This was a fun fight. Breidis is a very impressive guy. He's 27-1, 19 knockouts. The one is to Alexander Usyk, the former undisputed champion at cruiserweight, who's moved up to heavyweight. That's his only loss, is to Usyk, and it was a very close fight. Dorticos is a very tough guy, very long, nice jab. He tried to be on the front foot the whole time, but Breidis was just a little too slick on his feet, man, and essentially gave him a boxing lesson, despite being shorter, having less of a reach. He just had better feet. He had a denser arsenal to go to. It felt like, Dorticos was trying to come forward, again, use his long jab, try to throw the right hand as much as possible, but he just couldn't be busy enough, and I think it got too challenging to hit Breidis in the head, and so he would try to, work the body and pin him on the ropes, but Breidis' feet were tremendous. A lot of these top-level cruiserweights, I think young heavyweights should be looking at for footwork, because it's guys that aren't that much smaller than you in theory, and it's a more athletic version of heavyweight. So this was a cool fight. Both of these guys fought back in June of 2019, and I think Breidis won against a guy named Kurzastov Glavaki, and there were some fouls at the end of the fight. I don't remember exactly how it went, but I remember watching it. There were some fouls at the end of the fight, and there was some dispute as to why and how the fight ended. And I believe Glavaki protested either with the belt or with the World Boxing Super Series, and nothing came of that. And then we had COVID and the pandemic, and so, it basically left these guys waiting for 15 months to finish out a fucking tournament. But I think what you saw probably is the two best cruiserweights in the world fight, and I think you can confidently say that at the moment that Mairis Breidis is the #1 cruiserweight on the planet. I think you can say that pretty confidently. This is also the second season of the World Boxing Super Series, and while I love the concept, it just seems like it takes too fucking long. The Josh Taylor Prograis fight took like 8-9 months to make. Same with the Donaire and Inoue fights. So I would love to see them keep doing this, because it forces the best in certain divisions to fight each other, but it also fucking takes forever. And I'm unclear as to why that's happening. Did a little research, couldn't find much on it. So yeah, if you know something about it, drop it down in the comments. I would love to know why they take 9 to 15 months to put a fight together. So that's it for that. So as far as this Charlo doubleheader, great fucking undercard. The way it was set up was they split it. If you didn't buy the fight, it was set up into essentially 2 separate pay-per-view cards where, Jermall and Derevyanchenko headlining part 1, Jermell and Jason Rosario headlining part 2. And the first part of the card had John Riel Casimero. I believe he's a champion at 112 pounds, if not 115. I might even be wrong about that. He might be champion at 118. But very awkward style, explosive puncher, 5'2.5" or whatever. Not a very short guy, but super awkward to deal with. You had Brandon Figueroa after that, really putting it on this guy Vasquez, who is related to Israel Vasquez, Damian Vasquez, the nephew of Israel Vasquez, really put it on him. That fight probably went on a little bit too long. And then we had Jermall Charlo against Sergiy Derevyanchenko. Now, I'm going to start with this because I talk about it every time I feel this way. The scorecards on this first fight, the Charlo Derevyanchenko fight, were very wide. And I did not see a wide fight. I saw a close fight. I didn't really score it formally the first time I watched it live, but I scored it after the fact. And I scored the fight 114-114. I would have to go back and watch it again, maybe score it again. Obviously, when you're scoring a fight live, you really only get one chance. But me being unbiased, I scored the fight 114-114, which is 6 rounds to 6. I think the way I had it set up, I had Charlo up 6-3 through 9, and I thought Derevyanchenko won the last 3 rounds. So, that being said, though, the fight did look somewhat similar to what I thought it could look like. the difference is that Jermall adjusted. You know, Jermall's boxing skills to me were much more consistent and tricky than I was given credit for. You know, he uses jab real nice. He's got nice long punches, and there was, you know, at least through the first 4 or 5 rounds, he really did a nice job of keeping Derevyanchenko at the end of his length and keeping the fight on his terms with just long punches. And, you know, ultimately he buzzed Derevyanchenko a little bit early, and he really had control over the pace and the geography of the fight basically through the first 5-6 rounds. And eventually, you know, Derevyanchenko being the world-class guy that he is, you know, he started getting on the inside, started landing some body shots, started landing that right hand, the straight right hand, and the roundhouse over the top, you know. And I would say down the stretch that it was a very competitive fight. And, you know, that Derevyanchenko at times could pin Charlo on the ropes and could land combinations. But there was also a lot of instances of him getting Charlo on the ropes and you know, Charlo doing something to fuck his timing up, you know, whether it be, you know, sticking that long jab out there or feinting or tying up. But he was really good about not letting Derevyanchenko get set for long periods of time. Even if he would get a little combination off. You know, Charlo always had something for him, or would eventually just make him start missing. And, you know, I think down the stretch he took his foot off the gas a little bit. I think he could have closed the show a little stronger, but again, it's like, you know, I said he wasn't going to win at all, and he won the fight. But, you know, the other thing that he does that I really like, my favorite little move that he does is his check hook. And the check hook, if you don't know, is essentially you're throwing your front hand hook as you're stepping back and your opponent is stepping forward. So, therefore, momentum is coming, you're turning it over and sort of rolling out. And he does that move really well, and it made Derevyanchenko very hesitant to charge him and try to get in his space. And that part was very impressive, man, between the long jabs and the long right hands, the check hooks when Derevyanchenko would try to get in on the inside. It just made it very difficult for Derevyanchenko to do what he wanted to do. But when he was able to get Charlo on the inside and pin him in spots, he landed a lot of effective shots. But at the end of the day, the way you're scoring the fight is round by round. You know, who's controlling the greatest amount of time, who's landing the clean, effective punches, and who's working, you know, the most consistently. You know, you have to look at each round as, you know, who would I rather be at the end of that round. This fight had a lot of close rounds, which is frustrating to see scorecards like 118, 110, 117, 111, even 116, 112. You know, that's at least like within the realm of reality, but this seemed like a more of a flip a coin kind of fight than the scores would indicate. And I think that's unfortunate because, you know, what would have happened if Derevyanchenko did even better than that? Would they have been paying attention? You know, would the judges, you know, have taken notice of the work he was doing? So that part of it is frustrating as a fan. You know, you want to see these guys get a fair shake, man. You want to see everybody get a fucking 50-50 chance in every fight. Like, you have to win the fight to win the fight. And that's ultimately been one of my biggest critiques of the Charlos over time. And that's not necessarily even their responsibility, that they've been the beneficiaries of, you know, being the A side, favorable judging, favorable commentary, you know. And that's why I think it was so surprising for Jermell to lose that decision to Tony Harrison, because they're sort of used to, oh, you know, this is how much I have to do to win a decision. And over time, you do that often enough, and what you think it takes to win a round gets a little bit skewed. I think as they go up in competition, though, their intensity ramps up, their passion ramps up. That's what's great about these guys, man. They really are passionate. You know, they're passionate athletes. They love what they do. They want to show you. They want to fucking prove it to you. They want to prove people like me fucking wrong. And you got to like that, man. How can you not fucking like that? That's just good entertainment as far as I'm concerned. And I guess that's a good segue into the second part of the card, which had Jermell Charlo taking on Jason Rosario. And this was a weird little fight, man. This was a weird little fight. First of all, I feel like Jermell is a little bit more of an explosive, wide swinger than Jermall. The power, even though he's got a lower knockout percentage, the power is just jarring. It comes out of nowhere. And, Rosario felt that. So, my prediction on this fight, my thinking on this fight was that, having seen Rosario against J-Rock, I thought that, because Julian Williams fucking hit Rosario very hard in that fight, and it didn't really move him too much. My thinking was that, Rosario was going to be able to basically handle Charlo's power, and that his power and pressure over time was going to get to him, and that later on in the fight, he'd be rolling downhill a little bit and either get a late round stoppage or win a decision, and that's not what happened. What happened was they came out and, even though Jermell's jab is a little less consistent, he's a little more unpredictable than Jermall, and he can fight off the back foot. He kind of pounces, like he'll be moving and just swing something crazy at you. So you have to be very aware, and as a result, Rosario gets dropped in the first. And you could see he was a little buzzed. It was like a weird knockdown, but it was up on the top of the head. Clearly rung his bell a little bit, and he didn't really get into the fight until round 3 or 4. And so starting in round 3 or 4, what you see is Rosario in stretches is able to, similarly to Derevyanchenko, kind of get Jermell on the ropes, land a couple of body shots in combination, and you could hear the power on his shots. You could hear that he hit very hard. You could hear that, when he really sat down and let it go, that the power was real. But ultimately, what happened is then Charlo dropped him again, I believe in the 6th, and I think legitimately buzzed him, and it was very close to the end of the round. I think Rosario got lucky. In between those knockdowns, what you had was a super competitive fight. Rosario at times able to land combinations. Charlo at times able to fight really nicely off the back foot, feinting, jabbing, kind of throwing something wild and unpredictable to keep Rosario, with his hands in his pockets a little more. And then what was really smart too, because Jermell's upper body movement and head movement is so good, eventually Rosario's reaching, and eventually he's following, and he's a little impatient. He's not, cutting the ring off. And you could tell by the 6th round that at least tactically, Jermell had a pretty good grip on what he needed to do. And then in the 8th, it happened, man. Out of fucking nowhere, this little jab to the body puts Rosario down, and it looked like he had a seizure. I don't think he did. I think what happened was he got hit in the diaphragm or in the abdomen when he wasn't engaged and he wasn't ready for it, and it knocked the wind out of him. But it looked like a seizure, but he literally just sat on the canvas, gulping for air. And it was hard to watch, actually. And it was such a sudden punch. There's one other instance I can think of a fighter getting knocked out to the body, and I can't remember the opponent, but I do remember that at one time Sergey Kovalev knocked somebody out with a jab to the body. It's very rare that you see that, but it's an odd mechanics, right? Because if you're coming forward, your abdomen's not engaged, or you're on your exhale, and I slip it in, and I have nice form, and I'm rooted in my feet, like, there is something about the physics of that, of you coming toward me and of me sticking it out at the right time. It hits you right at the peak point of power. That's a hard punch to take, and I think it's just a testament to Jermell's punching power. He's really a very, very explosive puncher, which, again, I wasn't really giving him enough credit for that. I didn't think just based on the shots that Williams had hit Rosario with, I didn't think Jermell could hurt him. And that's where I had the fight wrong. I didn't think that there was really the possibility that on a one-punch basis that, Charlo could completely fuck with Rosario's game plan and have him, keeping his hands in his pocket. I didn't think that was what was going to happen. But that's what happened. And that's what, that's what great fighters do, is they adjust to their opponent's strength. They adjust in the moment. They make changes on the fly. And the truth is, man, anything this guy Rosario was going to do, I think over time, Jermell had an answer for it, man. It got to a couple points, too, where he was holding a lot. And Rosario would get close to him. You tie him right up, walk him to the center. And, I don't think Rosario's inside game is real sophisticated. There's the other side of it, too, where Rosario's boxing game needs a lot of work. And, he was able to hurt Julian Williams. He was able to hit Williams. I can't necessarily speak to that performance, but just comparatively as two elite level guys, it seems like maybe that was an off night for Williams and less about, what a killer Rosario is. I think he's still a tough kid. He's 25 years old. He's 20-2 with 14 knockouts. He is a good fighter. I think that he could still be a factor at 154, but he wasn't any match for this guy ultimately. Even if in stretches he could make the fight competitive and even win some rounds, I would say. I think he won 2 or 3 rounds of the fight. The other thing I noticed too, if I'm being brutally honest, he looked a little bit overtrained. His legs didn't look great to me. His punch resistance didn't look great to me. And he looked a little drawn at the weigh-in. That's just my opinion. Those are generally the signs of somebody that struggled to make weight. If your punch resistance isn't that good, you look a little drained. You're not as explosive. And that, that's on him. I'm not making excuses for him just because I predicted he would win. But I am saying that he looked a little overtrained. And that's something that he's going to have to work on, in these big fights, of knowing that point. What's the point where the training is beneficial and what's the point where it kind of stops helping me? And he has to find that for himself, ultimately. I think that point is different for everybody. I bet if you ask somebody like the Charlos, they would tell you there is no point. I'm going to fucking train till I fucking hit the floor. That doesn't really work for everybody, And I'm sure, even with all the Lions only shit and whatever, I'm sure the Charlos have a very good idea, very good gauge of what that training point is like. I got to cut it off now, because if I don't cut it off now, it's going to stop being advantageous. It's going to start hurting me. So these are all lessons for Rosario. And I think that both of the Charlo brothers ultimately had great performances. They probably learned a lot for themselves going forward. I mean, particularly Jermall, being in such a, a physical testing fight, when you come out of the other side on that can only make you better, because I don't think, it wasn't like such a physical, Barrera Morales fight where I feel like it took years off, but it was a rough fight against a top level guy who's shown he's a top level guy against other top level guys. And, I think it opens up the door for Jermall to be like, one of these dudes has to fight me, be it Danny Jacobs, Golovkin, Demetrius Andrade. Somebody's got to start fucking paying attention and fight this guy. I think Andrade and Jermall is the fight, and I think that's one you can make, because they're both, they're both middleweights. They're both in their prime. Why the fuck not? They're both having a hard time getting Golovkin and dudes of that caliber. So why not make that fight happen now? As far as Jermell, they talked about it a bunch, but junior middleweight is really stacked right now. It's really a very stacked weight class. He has a lot of options. My personal pick for his next fight, I would choose one of 2 fighters. I would have Jermell fight either Erislandy Lara, the Cuban champion, who you've heard me talk about a bunch on this show, or I would have him fight Jarrett Hurd, who was actually the last guy to beat Erislandy Lara. I think that both of those guys would give him a very difficult time, and beating either of them I think would only further solidify that he's the number one guy in the division. I think he did that in this fight. This fight was his way of being like, this is my fucking weight class. I got three belts now, so he's the unified champion. You know, everybody has to go through him now. Or he needs to fight the other champion, Patrick Teixeira from Brazil, and unify the division, man. Have an undisputed junior middleweight champion. You know, that's something to fucking get excited about. And he's 3 out of 4 belts, you know. And if he's not going to fight any of those guys, he's got Julian Williams. He's got Brian Castano. He's got a lot of very, very difficult, legitimate opponents to go to. Jermall's options are not quite as wide open because of the promotional difficulties, but as far as the boxing landscape, I want to see these guys in with the top because they are the top now. There's no denying that with the level of opponents they've beaten here. This next weekend on Saturday, Jose Zepeda is going to fight Ivan Baranchyk. Very excited about that fucking matchup. That's a nice matchup of junior welterweight contenders. That's going to be on ESPN Plus. Definitely recommend watching that. And that's it for this week, guys. I appreciate you tuning into episode 20 of the Slip and Weave podcast. This has been fucking way fun doing this every week. I appreciate you guys when you hit me up and shit. Like, it means a lot. Yeah, so I'll see you guys next week, and hopefully I don't get any more fucking predictions wrong anytime soon. All right, take it easy, guys. Peace.